It was late, a Tuesday night, and I was already tucked into bed, just unwinding with some work emails on my phone. The screen was a comforting glow in the dark room until a name popped up that instantly snapped me out of it: Sarah. It had been months since we'd last spoken, and frankly, I hadn't expected to hear from her ever again. Not since that night she'd shown up at my place, practically demanding I co-sign a loan for Mike's failing restaurant. I'd said no. And she'd really let me have it, storming out and screaming words like, "Hope you die alone, you pathetic loser. At least I have a family who loves me. You'll never be anything but a bitter, jealous failure." I read her message twice more, just to be sure. Then, I put my phone on the nightstand, clicked off the lamp, and surprisingly, I fell asleep. But the quiet didn't last. My parents called at 3:18 a.m. I let it ring 4 times. Because you just know a call at that hour isn't going to be good news. "Your sister's in the hospital," my mom choked out, her voice shaky, almost theatrical. "She needs surgery, immediately. The doctors say it's critical. We need $35,000 by morning, or they won't operate." I sat up slowly, running a hand through my hair. "Which hospital?" I asked, my voice still thick with sleep. "That doesn't matter right now," Mom cut me off. "We need you to wire the money. Your father and I don't have that kind of cash, and Sarah's insurance won't cover this procedure. You're the only one who can help." "What happened to her?" I pressed. "An accident. She fell down the stairs at home. Internal bleeding. The doctors say if we don't pay for the surgery tonight, her condition could become irreversible." My eyes drifted to my phone, the screen still showing Sarah's ugly text from just hours before. The timestamp glowed in the dark. "No," I said, the word coming out flat. My mom's voice cracked then. "What? You can't be serious. This is your sister. Your only sister." "I'm very serious," I replied, already pulling the covers back up. "I'm going back to sleep now. Good night." I hung up before she could say another word. The phone rang immediately, again and again. I silenced it, plugged it into the charger, and surprisingly, sleep came easier than I expected. Morning arrived with a staggering 73 missed calls and 42 text messages. I made coffee first, a deliberate act of self-preservation, before even glancing at them. The messages were a torrent: Mom's tearful pleas, Dad's cold fury, Sarah's husband, Mike, sending me paragraphs about what a monstrous person I was for leaving his wife without help. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years suddenly had strong opinions about my character. An uncle I'd met twice at funerals informed me I was destined for eternal damnation. I deleted every single one without a reply and drove to work. My colleague, Olivia, noticed something was off during our morning meeting. I'd been staring blankly at the conference room wall for 5 minutes while she discussed the Brennan account. "Everything okay?" she asked gently. "Family emergency," I said, shrugging. "They'll get over it." She didn't press, and I appreciated her for that. Olivia had met my family once, years ago, at a company holiday party. Sarah had gotten completely plastered, telling anyone who'd listen how I'd always been jealous because she was the pretty one, the fun one, the one who actually knew how to live life instead of hiding behind spreadsheets and business suits. Olivia had quietly suggested we leave early that night. Later, at 2:30 p.m., my office phone rang. Brenda, our receptionist, transferred a call, saying it was my mother. I picked up, mostly out of morbid curiosity. The hospital is threatening to discharge Sarah without the surgery. Mom blurted out, no greeting, no preamble. They're saying she can just recover at home with pain medication and monitoring. Your father and I are trying to convince them how serious this is, but they won't listen unless we guarantee payment. Sounds like she'll be fine then, I replied, a calm I didn't entirely feel in my chest. How can you be so cruel? She wailed. This is your sister, lying in a hospital bed, suffering, and you won't even help her. The same sister who texted me last night hoping I'd just disappear? That sister? Silence stretched, thick and heavy. She didn't mean that, Mom finally whispered. She was upset. You know how she gets when she's emotional. I do know, I said. That's exactly why I'm not sending money. We raised you better than this, she snapped, her voice hardening. Your father is so disappointed. He can barely look at photos of you anymore. Tell Dad I said hello, I countered, then hung up. I blocked their number from the office line right after. The evening brought a fresh wave of attacks, this time on social media. Sarah had posted a long, rambling status update about her heartless sister who refused to save her life, complete with a photo of herself in a hospital gown, looking pale and tragically dramatic. The comment section exploded, filled with people I'd never met calling me every name imaginable. Several tagged me directly, making sure I saw their outrage. I reported a post for harassment and headed to the gym. 3 days crawled by. The calls and messages gradually dwindled as my family, I guess, finally started to realize I wasn't going to respond. Sarah eventually posted an update, announcing she was recovering at home, that God had blessed her with survival despite having such a terrible sister, and that she'd never forget who abandoned her in her darkest hour. I, meanwhile, bought new running shoes and increased my morning jog distance. The truth, as it often does, started leaking out 2 weeks later. It came through Aunt Charlotte, my mom's younger sister, who'd always maintained a bit of a distance from the rest of the family. She called from a number I didn't recognize. I answered, thinking it might be work-related. I need to tell you something about Sarah's hospital visit, Charlotte said, without a single preamble. Your parents are lying to you. The whole thing was staged. I pulled my car over into a grocery store parking lot, my hands suddenly clammy on the wheel. Staged how? I managed. Sarah went to the emergency room with chest pains. They ran tests, found nothing serious, gave her some anxiety medication, and sent her home after 6 hours. The bill was $800. Your mother decided to turn it into this elaborate scheme to get money out of you because Sarah and Mike are 3 months behind on their mortgage. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. How do you know this? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Mike got drunk last weekend at a barbecue and started bragging about it, she explained. Said they almost got 35 grand out of you, but you were too stubborn to care if your own sister suffered. He thought it was hilarious they even tried. Your mother was furious with him for talking, but several people heard. I figured you deserved to know what they're really like. Why are you telling me? I asked, the question heavy. Because I've watched your mother manipulate people my whole life, Charlotte said, a weary resignation in her tone. And I'm tired of staying quiet about it. She did the same thing to me 10 years ago. Claimed she needed money for emergency surgery that turned out to be an elective cosmetic procedure. I gave her $12,000 I never got back. You were smart to say no. We talked for another 20 minutes. Charlotte confirmed details I'd long suspected but never wanted to acknowledge. How Mom had always favored Sarah. How she convinced Dad that I was difficult and ungrateful. How Sarah had learned to weaponize their parents' favoritism into a lifetime of getting whatever she wanted, while I was expected to be the responsible one who asked for nothing. I thanked Charlotte for calling and sat in the parking lot for another hour, watching people load groceries into their cars, wondering how many of them had families that would fake medical emergencies for money. The next move came from an unexpected direction. My father showed up at my office building on a Thursday afternoon, waiting in the lobby until I came down for a coffee break. Security called up to ask if I wanted them removed. I said no, opting to handle it myself. Dad looked older than I remembered. His hair had gone completely gray since I'd last seen him at Christmas, 18 months ago. He stood when I approached, his expression a mix of anger and exhaustion. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low. "No, we don't," I replied, crossing my arms. "Your mother is devastated. She cries every night because of what you've done to this family." "What I've done?" I scoffed. "I didn't stage a medical emergency to try and extort money from anyone." His face hardened. Sarah was genuinely scared. She thought something was seriously wrong. "Your mother was trying to help her get the best care possible by lying about needing $35,000 for a surgery that never happened." "That's not helping, Dad," I said, my voice flat. "That's fraud." "Don't talk to me about fraud," he shot back. "You've defrauded this family of basic human decency. Sarah needed support, and you abandoned her. Sarah needed $800 for an ER visit that found nothing wrong," I stated, keeping my voice even. "She got anxiety medication and went home. Those are the facts, whether you want to acknowledge them or not." Dad stepped closer, lowering his voice, a familiar condescending tone. "You've always been jealous of your sister. Always trying to make her look bad because she has what you don't. A husband, a family, people who actually care about her." Something cold settled in my chest. "Is that what you really think?" I asked, my voice quiet. "That I'm jealous?" "What else would explain this cruelty?" he challenged. "Your own sister reaches out for help, and you turn your back. What kind of person does that? The kind who's tired of being treated like an ATM machine by people who've spent my entire life telling me I'm not good enough." I picked up my coffee cup from where I'd set it on the lobby table. "You should leave now. I have work to do." "If you walk away right now," he warned, his voice rising, "you're walking away from this family permanently. Your mother and I won't tolerate this disrespect any longer." I headed toward the elevator. "You haven't tolerated me for years, Dad," I called back, my voice steady. "This just makes it official." His voice followed me across the lobby. "Don't come crying to us when you end up alone with nobody who cares whether you live or suffer." I pressed the elevator button and waited, my back to him, until the doors opened. Several people in the lobby were staring. I didn't care. The doors closed on Dad's angry, fading face, and I rode back up to the 14th floor in silence. That night, I contacted an attorney, David Chin, specializing in family law. Not because I planned immediate legal action, but because I wanted documentation, a paper trail. He'd seen cases like mine before. He listened to my whole story, asked detailed questions about the timeline and evidence, and recommended I preserve everything: Sarah's original text, the call logs, Charlotte's testimony, the social media posts. "You might need this if they escalate," David said, his tone grim. "Some families don't know when to stop." "What would escalation look like?" I asked. filing false police reports claiming you stole from them, spreading defamatory statements that damage your professional reputation, showing up at your workplace repeatedly, harassment campaigns. I've seen all of it. I paid his retainer fee and left his office with a plan for documentation and protection if things worsened. And they got worse. Sarah's husband, Mike, started calling my office directly, bypassing Brenda by claiming to be a client with an urgent matter. The first time, he got through to my desk and spent 15 minutes screaming about how I had endangered his wife through neglect. I hung up and reported his number. He simply called from different phones. The harassment expanded to my professional network. Mike created fake LinkedIn profiles and sent messages to my colleagues and supervisors, claiming I'd stolen money from my suffering sister and suggesting they should reconsider employing someone with such questionable ethics. My boss, Eleanor, called me into her office after receiving the third such message. "I know this is garbage," Eleanor said, showing me her phone. "But I need you to make it stop. It's reflecting on the whole department." I showed her the documentation David had helped me compile. Screenshots, call logs, witness statements from Charlotte, medical records Charlotte had obtained through Sarah's careless social media posts that directly contradicted the emergency surgery story. Eleanor reviewed everything carefully. "Do you want to press charges?" she asked. "I want them to leave me alone," I replied. "If legal action accomplishes that, then yes. Let me talk to corporate legal. We might be able to send a cease and desist on behalf of the company since he's targeting you through work channels." The cease and desist letter arrived at Sarah and Mike's house 5 days later, on company letterhead, signed by 3 attorneys, promising swift legal action if the harassment continued. Attorney Chin sent his own letter. The same day, documenting the fraud attempt and threatening civil action for defamation and emotional distress. Silence followed. Blissful, complete silence for almost 3 weeks. I used that time to rebuild the parts of my life they'd managed to damage. The stress of the harassment had cost me sleep, affected my concentration at work, and left me constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next attack. Now, with legal protection in place and their communications blocked, I could finally breathe. Olivia became an unexpected ally during this period. She invited me to join her book club, a group of 6 women who met monthly at a wine bar downtown. I'd never been much of a joiner, always too busy or too tired or too worried about what my family might need from me next. But now, with that weight lifted, I found myself actually enjoying these evenings. The women in the group had their own complicated family stories. Chloe had been disowned by her parents for marrying outside their religion 15 years ago. Maya hadn't spoken to her brother in a decade after he'd stolen their grandmother's jewelry to pay gambling debts. Sophia's mother still called her fat every time they spoke, despite Sophia being a perfectly healthy weight and a marathon runner. We didn't spend our meetings dwelling on family dysfunction, but knowing these women understood made the occasional mentions easier. When I briefly explained why I'd cut off contact with my parents and sister, nobody gasped or tried to convince me that family was everything and I should reconsider. Chloe simply nodded and said, "Good for you. That takes real courage." Work continued improving, too. The Brennan account expansion led to my team being assigned 2 additional major clients, both requiring the same detailed analytical approach that had made the original project successful. I hired 2 junior analysts to help manage the increased workload, spending weeks training them on the systems and standards I'd developed. One of them, a recent graduate named Daniel, reminded me uncomfortably of my younger self. Eager to please, apologetic for taking up space, constantly worried about being a burden. During our 3rd week together, Daniel apologized for the 5th time in an hour for asking clarifying questions. "Daniel, stop," I said, setting down my pen. "Questions are part of learning. You're not bothering me. This is literally my job to make sure you understand what you're doing." "I just don't want to waste your time," he mumbled. "You're not wasting anything," I insisted. "Where did you learn that asking for help was a waste of someone's time?" He looked uncomfortable. "My parents always said I needed to figure things out myself. That successful people don't need their hands held." I recognized that philosophy. My parents had said similar things, usually right before praising Sarah for asking them to solve all her problems. The double standard had been invisible to them, but glaringly obvious to me. "Your parents were wrong," I told Daniel. "Successful people ask questions, learn from experts, and build on other people's knowledge. That's how progress happens. So ask me whatever you need to ask, and I'll let you know if I'm actually too busy to answer." He nodded slowly, and over the following months, I watched him gain confidence. He stopped apologizing constantly, started contributing ideas in meetings, and developed into a genuinely skilled analyst. Watching his transformation felt oddly healing, like I was giving someone else the support and encouragement I'd never received. The healing wasn't always straightforward, though. Small things would still trigger unexpected reactions. A colleague mentioning her sister helped her move into a new apartment, and I felt a sharp twist of something I couldn't quite name. A commercial showing a mother and daughter shopping together, laughing about shared memories, and I had to leave the room. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Evelyn Reed, not because I thought I'd made the wrong decision, but because I wanted to process everything in a healthy way. She was in her 50s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense approach that I deeply appreciated. "You're grieving," she explained during our 4th session. "Not for who they actually were, but for who you wish they could have been. That's a legitimate loss." "I don't feel sad," I said. "Mostly I feel relieved." "Grief isn't always sadness," Dr. Reed replied softly. "Sometimes it's anger. Sometimes it's just emptiness where a relationship should have been. All of those are valid responses to losing family, even when you're the one who made the choice to walk away." We talked about my childhood, the patterns I'd normalized because I didn't have a framework to understand they were dysfunctional. How Sarah could crash her car 3 times in high school, and Dad just bought her a new one each time. But when I asked if they could help with college textbooks, Mom said I needed to learn financial responsibility. How holidays always revolved around what Sarah wanted, where she wanted to go, who she wanted to invite. How I'd learned to make myself small and undemanding because needing things only led to disappointment. "You trained yourself not to have needs," Dr. Reed said. "That's a survival mechanism, but it's also a prison. You're allowed to want things. You're allowed to expect basic respect and consideration from the people in your life." The concept felt foreign, but intriguing. I'd spent so long being the low-maintenance one, the person who could be counted on not to cause problems or make demands. Building a life where I actually expressed preferences and expectations required rewiring decades of conditioning. I started small. Telling Olivia when I didn't want to see a movie she'd suggested instead of just going along with it. Letting Daniel know when I needed uninterrupted work time instead of always being available for questions. Ending a 3rd date with someone who'd spent the entire evening talking about himself without asking me a single question, instead of giving him another chance because maybe he'd been nervous. Each small assertion of my own needs and boundaries felt simultaneously terrifying and profoundly liberating. The book club met at Chloe's house for our October gathering. Her place was warm and welcoming, full of plants and comfortable furniture, the kind of casual clutter that made a space feel lived in rather than staged. We were discussing a memoir about family estrangement when Maya asked me directly how I was handling the aftermath of cutting off my family. Honestly, better than I expected, I admitted. I kept waiting for this crushing guilt or regret, and it just never came. Mostly, I'm just angry it took me so long. That's because you were trained to prioritize their feelings over your own, Sophia said. It takes time to unlearn that programming. Chloe refilled my wine glass. Have they tried contacting you since the legal letters? She asked. Not a word, I replied. I think they finally realized I meant it. Good, Maya said firmly. Some people only understand boundaries when there are consequences for crossing them. We moved on to discussing the book, but the conversation stayed with me. These women had become something my family never was, a genuine support system. They celebrated my successes without jealousy, offered help without strings attached, and respected my boundaries without making me feel guilty for having them. This, I realized, was what healthy relationships looked like. Thanksgiving approached, my first holiday completely separate from my family of origin. The prospect should have felt lonely or sad. But instead, I found myself planning a Friendsgiving dinner with the book club women. We each brought dishes, ate too much, and spent the evening playing board games and sharing stories that had nothing to do with family obligation or guilt. Olivia pulled me aside while we were cleaning up. You know, you're glowing, right? She said, a warm smile on her face. I don't mean that in a cheesy way. You literally look healthier and happier than I've ever seen you. I feel it, I admitted. It's like I've been holding my breath for 34 years and finally exhaled. That's beautiful, she whispered. I'm proud of you. You know what you did took real strength. Her words meant more than she probably knew. My parents had never said they were proud of me. Not even when I graduated summa cum laude, or got promoted, or bought my first apartment. Sarah received praise for just showing up, for trying, for merely existing. I received expectations and criticism, and the assumption that my accomplishments were just what I was supposed to do. Hearing someone acknowledge my strength and walking away felt like being seen for the very first time. December brought a complicated test. Charlotte called to say that Sarah and Mike were definitely heading toward their first divorce. Sarah had apparently discovered Mike had been having an affair with a hostess from the failed restaurant, and the fallout was spectacular. She's calling everyone in the family asking for money to hire a better lawyer, Charlotte reported. Your father gave her $10,000. She's been posting on social media about betrayal and how family is supposed to support each other in hard times. Let me guess, I sighed. She wants me to contribute, too? Your mother already reached out to several cousins, claiming you'd want to help, but she didn't have your current number, Charlotte said. I shut that down immediately, but I thought you should know what they're attempting. I thanked Charlotte for the warning and felt nothing but profound relief that I'd changed my number and blocked all their access. The old me would have felt guilty, would have wondered if I should help despite everything. The new me recognized the manipulation attempt for exactly what it was and went about my day unbothered. Dr. Reed and I discussed it during my next session. How do you feel about your sister's divorce? She asked gently. I feel bad for her kids, I admitted. They are the innocent victims in all of this. But Sarah chose Mike, chose to stay with him through all his failures and schemes. Chose to participate in trying to defraud me. Her consequences aren't my responsibility. That's a healthy perspective, Dr. Reed acknowledged. Are you worried she might escalate again? The legal protections are still in place, I said. If she tries anything, Attorney Chin will handle it. I'm not going to live my life waiting for the next attack. Winter settled in, bringing shorter days and longer nights. I started taking evening painting classes at a community center, finally pursuing a hobby I discovered I enjoyed, despite being utterly terrible at it. The instructor, an older woman named Helen, had a philosophy I appreciated. Art isn't about being good, she'd say, it's about expressing yourself and enjoying the process. My paintings were objectively bad, colors that didn't quite work, proportions that seemed off, techniques I couldn't master no matter how many times Helen demonstrated them. But creating them made me happy. Choosing colors, deciding what to paint, allowing myself to make something imperfect just for the pure joy of making it. All of it felt like reclaiming parts of myself I'd suppressed for years. Daniel asked to see my work one day after overhearing me mention the class to Olivia. I showed him a painting of Cooper, sitting in a field. The proportions were slightly wrong, but the colors were vibrant and cheerful. I love this, he said, surprising me. It's got personality. Like, you can tell someone made this because they wanted to, not because they were trying to prove anything. His words captured exactly what I'd been feeling but couldn't quite articulate. I'd spent my whole life trying to prove I was worthy, valuable, deserving of basic love and respect. These paintings existed just because I enjoyed making them. No deeper purpose, no validation seeking, just creation for its own sake. The year ended quietly. I spent New Year's Eve at Chloe's party, surrounded by the book club women and their partners and friends. At midnight, we toasted to new beginnings and letting go of what no longer served us. To choosing ourselves, Maya said, raising her glass. We all drank to that. Then Mom had a stroke. Charlotte called to tell me, her voice gentle but firm. It's real this time. I'm at the hospital with her. Your father is here. Sarah is flying in tomorrow morning. I thought you should know, but I'll understand if you don't come. How bad? I asked, my voice flat. Serious, but stable, she replied. She'll need rehabilitation, probably months of it. The doctors say she'll recover most of her function if she does the work. I thanked Charlotte and ended the call. Then I sat on my couch for 2 hours, staring at the wall, trying to figure out what I felt. Anger, yes. Sadness, maybe. Relief that I felt nothing resembling the guilt they probably expected me to feel. I didn't go to the hospital. Sarah sent a text the next day. Her first direct communication since that initial "hope you die alone" message. Mom had a stroke and you can't even visit. You really are heartless. Dad was right about you. I blocked her number. The bills started arriving at my apartment 3 weeks later. Medical invoices addressed to me, despite my name being nowhere on Mom's insurance or treatment paperwork. Someone had given the hospital my information and claimed I'd agreed to be financially responsible for Mom's care. Attorney Chin made 3 phone calls and got it sorted out within 48 hours. The hospital apologized for the confusion and removed my information from their system. He also sent another letter to my parents' address, this one outlining potential criminal fraud charges if they continued attempting to financially obligate me without consent. More silence followed. I threw myself into work. The Brennan account expanded into 3 additional projects. Eleanor promoted me to senior analyst with a substantial raise. I bought a condo in a better neighborhood and adopted a dog from the shelter, a 3-year-old mixed breed named Cooper who had been surrendered by owners who said they didn't have time for him anymore. I changed my phone number and didn't give the new one to anyone from my family except Charlotte. I stopped checking social media entirely, deleting all my accounts and feeling lighter the moment they disappeared. The social media detox revealed just how much mental energy I'd been wasting on maintaining appearances and monitoring what my family said about me. Without the constant stream of Sarah's passive-aggressive posts about fake family members and Mom's pointed shares about ungrateful children, I found myself with hours of free time I hadn't realized I'd been losing. I filled those hours deliberately. I started learning piano through online tutorials, something I'd wanted to do since childhood, but my parents said was impractical and expensive. The keyboard I bought wasn't fancy, but sitting down to practice scales in my living room felt like reclaiming a piece of childhood wonder I'd abandoned trying to be the daughter they wanted. Work took an interesting turn when Eleanor approached me about leading a new initiative, developing predictive analytics tools for client retention. The project would mean managing a larger team, interfacing directly with C-suite executives, and potentially traveling quarterly to our satellite offices. 2 years ago, I would have hesitated, worried about being away from family obligations or what emergencies might arise while I was unavailable. Now, I said yes immediately. The promotion came with a substantial salary increase and my own corner office with windows overlooking the city of Denver. Daniel, who'd become an invaluable team member, congratulated me with genuine enthusiasm. "You deserve this," he said. "You've taught me more about this industry than 4 years of college did." His words reminded me of something Dr. Reed had said during one of our sessions: "The people who matter will celebrate your success, not resent it." My family had always treated my achievements as either expected or threatening. Sarah especially had a talent for diminishing anything good that happened to me, turning my promotions into examples of how I was all work and no life, or suggesting I probably kissed up to get ahead. Being surrounded by colleagues who genuinely supported each other felt revolutionary. The new role brought challenges I hadn't anticipated. One of the executives I worked with, Gerald, had a management style that reminded me uncomfortably of my father. He expected people to read his mind, got frustrated when they asked clarifying questions, and took credit for his team's successes while blaming them for any failures. Several team members came to me privately, expressing frustration with his behavior. In the past, I would have stayed silent, tried to work around the problem, made myself smaller to avoid conflict. But therapy and distance from my family had given me new tools. I documented Gerald's behavior carefully, gathered statements from affected team members, and presented the information to Eleanor with specific examples and suggested solutions. Eleanor took it seriously. Gerald received coaching on his management approach, and 2 of his direct reports were quietly reassigned to different projects. The situation improved gradually, and several people thanked me for addressing what they'd been tolerating for years. "How did you know he'd actually listen?" Daniel asked after hearing about the outcome. "I didn't know," I confessed. But I knew staying silent wasn't going to change anything. Sometimes you have to risk conflict to create something better. That philosophy extended into my personal life. I'd been casually dating, nothing serious, until I met Adam at a gallery opening Chloe dragged me to. He was looking at the same abstract piece I'd been studying, a chaotic swirl of colors that somehow felt peaceful. "I can't decide if I love this or hate this," he said, noticing me beside him. "Maybe it's both," I suggested. Sometimes the most interesting things are complicated. We ended up talking for 2 hours, long after Chloe had left with the person she'd actually come to meet. Adam was an architect who specialized in sustainable building design, recently divorced, with a 12-year-old daughter named Grace he had joint custody of. He'd been in therapy for 3 years, processing the end of his marriage and the complicated relationship with his ex-wife. Our first official date was coffee that turned into dinner that turned into walking around downtown Denver, talking until the restaurant started closing. He told me about his daughter, Grace, how she was struggling with the divorce and acting out at school. I told him about cutting off my family, the broad strokes without going into painful detail. That must have been hard, Adam said, his eyes reflecting understanding. Staying would have been harder, I replied. I finally figured out the difference between hard because it's painful and hard because it's wrong. He understood that distinction in a way most people didn't. His own family had complicated dynamics, a mother who'd never approved of his ex-wife and took the divorce as validation of her opinions, a brother who'd borrowed money repeatedly and never paid it back, a father who'd walked out when Adam was 15 and recently tried to reconnect now that Adam was successful. We didn't bond over family trauma exactly, but there was a shared understanding that made conversations easier. Neither of us had to explain why we'd set certain boundaries or why we were cautious about letting people too close. Dating Adam felt different than previous relationships. We took things slowly, both of us wary after being hurt by people we trusted. He met Cooper on our 5th date, bringing treats and spending 20 minutes throwing a ball in the park while I watched them play. Cooper's approval felt significant. He'd always been a good judge of character. I met Grace 2 months into dating Adam, a carefully orchestrated casual meeting at a museum. She was quiet and observant, clearly sizing me up and trying to figure out if I was a threat to her relationship with her dad. I didn't try too hard to win her over, just treated her like a person worthy of respect rather than an obstacle to navigate. "Your dog is cool," she said when Adam showed her pictures on his phone. "Can I meet him sometime?" "Sure, he loves meeting new people," I offered. That simple exchange felt like passing some kind of test. Adam told me later that Grace had asked if I seemed nice, a question apparently loaded with significance given how badly she'd reacted to the last person he dated. The relationship progressed naturally. Adam started staying over some weekends. When Grace was with her mother, I met his friends, he met mine, and we fell into comfortable rhythms of shared meals, long conversations, and quiet evenings reading in the same room. Olivia noticed the change. "You're in love with him," she stated one afternoon, a knowing look in her eye. "Maybe," I admitted, a small smile forming. "It's different than I expected. Calmer, less dramatic." "That's because it's healthy," she said. "Healthy love isn't supposed to be a roller coaster. It's supposed to be stable, supportive, and genuine." I thought about Sarah and Mike. Their relationship characterized by constant drama and breakups and grand gestures that never addressed their fundamental incompatibility. My parents had seemed to consider their explosive fights and tearful reconciliations proof of passion rather than dysfunction. What Adam and I had was different. We disagreed sometimes, worked through conflicts with actual communication, and respected each other's boundaries and needs. When I told him I needed space to process something, he gave it without making it about him. When he shared his anxieties about being a good father, I listened without trying to fix everything immediately. This was what partnership looked like when both people were whole individuals choosing to share their lives, rather than broken people trying to complete each other. The legal threats must have worked because nobody from my family attempted contact again. Charlotte sent occasional updates through email. Never pushing for reconciliation, just sharing information in case I wanted it. Mom's recovery was progressing slowly. Dad had retired. Sarah and Mike were talking about bankruptcy after the restaurant finally closed. I felt nothing reading these updates except mild curiosity, the way you might feel learning facts about strangers in a news article. My life didn't have room for people who saw me as a resource instead of a person. 2 years after the fake hospital emergency, I ran into Olivia at a coffee shop downtown Denver. We hadn't worked together since she'd transferred to the Denver office, but she was back in town visiting family. We caught up over lattes, talking about work and relationships and the weird ways life unfolds when you're not paying attention. "You seem different," Olivia said eventually. "Lighter, maybe. I can't quite pin it down." "I cut off my family," I said simply. "Turns out they were the weight I've been carrying." She nodded slowly. "I remember your sister from that holiday party. The drunk one who kept insulting you." "That's the one," I confirmed. "She tried to scam me for $35,000 by faking a medical emergency. When that didn't work, they all harassed me for months." Olivia's eyes widened. "That's insane." "It was predictable, actually," I said. "I just finally stopped pretending it wasn't happening." We talked for another hour about families, boundaries, and the strange guilt that comes with choosing yourself over people who share your DNA. Olivia admitted she'd gone through something similar with her own father years earlier, a rift that had never healed, but had allowed her to build a life free from constant manipulation and criticism. "Do you regret it?" I asked her. "Not for a second," she replied. "Some people don't deserve access to you just because they're related." That's a hard lesson, but an important one. Walking back to my car later, Cooper trotting beside me on his leash, I realized Olivia was right. The guilt had evaporated somewhere along the way, replaced by something more solid and sustainable: peace. My phone rang that evening, an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. "This is Sarah," a strained, older-sounding voice said. "Don't hang up, please." I waited. "Mom died yesterday. Heart attack. Dad wanted me to call you. There's going to be a funeral on Saturday." Silence stretched between us. I could hear her breathing, unsteady and nervous. "I'm sorry for your loss," I said finally, the words feeling almost alien. "That's it?" she snapped. "That's all you have to say? She was your mother, too. Don't you feel anything?" I thought about that. Really considered it. "I feel sad that she spent her whole life playing favorites and manipulating people instead of just being honest," I said, my voice calm. "I feel sad that she chose to enable your worst behaviors instead of helping you become a better person. Mostly, I feel sad that we never had the relationship I deserve to have with a mother." Sarah's breath caught, a sharp intake. "You blamed her for everything. You never took responsibility for being a difficult, judgmental person who looked down on everyone." "I took responsibility by removing myself from a toxic situation," I replied, my voice steady. "That's more than you've ever done. The funeral is at Riverside Chapel at 2:00. Dad expects you to be there." "I won't be attending," I told her. "Tell Dad I said he should focus on the family he has left." "You're really not coming to your own mother's funeral?" she whispered, disbelief thick in her tone. "I'm really not coming. Goodbye, Sarah." I ended the call and blocked the number. Cooper nudged my hand with his nose, sensing the tension. I scratched behind his ears and pulled up a delivery app to order dinner. Saturday arrived, clear and sunny. I took Cooper to the lake for a long hike, threw a tennis ball until my arm got tired, and stopped for ice cream on the way home. My phone stayed silent all day. I'd half expected more harassment, more attempts to guilt me into attending. But apparently, they'd finally accepted that I meant what I said. The inheritance drama started 3 weeks later. An attorney representing Dad's estate contacted me through my office, somehow tracking down my new contact information. There was a small inheritance from Mom, about $15,000 from a life insurance policy that listed both daughters as beneficiaries. Dad was contesting the distribution, claiming I'd abandoned the family and didn't deserve anything. Attorney Chen handled it with his usual efficiency. The policy was legally binding. Dad's feelings about my worthiness were irrelevant. The insurance company cut me a check 8 weeks later. I donated the entire amount to a non-profit organization that provided legal aid to people dealing with family financial abuse. The tax receipt arrived in January. I filed it with my other documents and forgot about it. Years continued passing. I got promoted again, this time to director level. Started dating Adam, the architect, who had his own complicated family history. We took things slowly, both of us cautious about letting people too close after being hurt by those who were supposed to love us unconditionally. Charlotte remained my only connection to the family I'd left behind. She sent occasional emails, never pushing for reconciliation, just sharing information in case I wanted it. Dad remarried 2 years after Mom died, a widow from his church who had 3 adult children of her own. Sarah and Mike divorced, then reconciled, then divorced again. Their kids were teenagers now, struggling with the chaos their parents created. I felt sympathy for those kids, understanding what it meant to grow up in a household where love came with conditions and manipulation was considered normal. But I couldn't help them. That wasn't my responsibility. My responsibility was to Cooper, to Adam, to the team I managed at work, to the life I built from scratch after walking away from people who wanted to tear me down. Some nights, I still thought about that text message, "Hope you die alone, you pathetic loser." And the phone call that followed hours later, demanding $35,000 or my sister would suffer. The sheer audacity of it still amazed me. The absolute confidence that I would comply, that I could be manipulated through manufactured crisis and guilt. They'd been wrong about me. Dead wrong. I didn't die alone. I lived surrounded by people who genuinely cared, who showed up without expecting payment, who treated kindness as something freely given instead of a transaction requiring reimbursement. The family I'd chosen was better than the one I'd been born into. That simple truth had taken me 34 years to accept, but once I did, everything else fell into place. Cooper nudged my hand again, pulling me back to the present moment. Adam was making dinner in the kitchen, humming along to music I couldn't quite hear. Outside the window, the city lights were starting to flicker on as evening settled in. My phone sat on the coffee table, silent and peaceful. No demands, no guilt trips, no manufactured emergencies designed to extract money or compliance. Just silence. A beautiful, heartfelt silence. I'd chosen myself over people who saw me as a resource. Made peace with being called cruel by those who'd shown me cruelty my entire life. Walked away from the role they'd assigned me, the responsible one, the backup plan, the person who would always sacrifice herself for a family that never sacrificed anything for her. The guilt they'd tried to weaponize had turned out to be nothing more than smoke, insubstantial, easily dispersed once I stopped breathing it in. I scratched Cooper's ears and smiled. Freedom. I'd learned sometimes required letting people think the worst of you. Required accepting that some relationships couldn't be saved because they'd never been real in the first place. The phone stayed silent. The evening stayed peaceful. My life stayed mine. And somewhere out there, Sarah probably still thought I was pathetic and heartless, suffering alone in my bitterness. She couldn't have been more wrong. But I'd stopped caring what she thought a long time ago. What about you? Have you ever had to choose yourself over the expectations of your family?